Business gurus such as Alex Hormozi have turned key man risk into this overblown boogeyman. The facts are that some of the greatest companies in the history of the world were built around one key man. So let's go back in time. Whether it's Henry Ford, Walt Disney, Sam Walton, Steve Jobs, Ralph Lauren, and now possibly the greatest businessman ever in the history of time, Elon Musk. But even more specifically to Alex Hormozi, in the business education category, people like Grant Cardone, Dave Ramsey, and even the great Tony Robbins. They've all built their companies by focusing and embracing key man risk and not focusing on mitigation of key man risk. So the common business advice seems to be out there right now from a lot of gurus, such as Alex Hormozi, is to mitigate key man risk. In other words, build in the systems, build in the things that you need to do to make the company transferable, more sellable, less risky. And that makes logical sense. It really does. I mean, think about it. Logically, if the company has a key founder, and if something happened to that key founder, my God, the company might go out of business, right? So it makes a lot of sense, logically, to focus on mitigating that key man risk. My suggestion and my observation is do the opposite of that. It's counterintuitive. You embrace key man risk. You embrace key man risk because the cost of mitigating key man risk, they outweigh the benefits you get from embracing key man risk. Key man risk really, mitigating key man risk is really just a diversification strategy. And what do? When you diversify, you spread the risk out. You sacrifice potential growth, but it's a lot less risky. And that's what I did, when I was building my wealth. As I was building my wealth, I was focused on my company. It was riskier, but it resulted in a tremendous amount of growth, as opposed to if I would have diversified as I was, making that money. I kept pouring money back into my focused investment, which was my company. And that's how most people build their wealth. After I sold my company, then what did I do? I was no longer wanting to grow. I had decided that was enough for me. I built the company large enough for me. And so at that point, then I diversified. Because that's what you do with diversification. You diversify to protect the wealth. You're no longer as interested in growth. You're interested in protecting, those assets. And that's what mitigation of key man risk is. And what's amazing to me is that a lot of the gurus out there, if not all of them, including myself, we constantly preach about focus and how important focusing on one thing or a small group of things is, as opposed to doing a whole bunch of different things, right? So all I'm suggesting here is for these gurus like Alex Hormozi, practice what you preach. If it's as important to focus your company on a very small amount of things for optimal growth, then why wouldn't you focus on your key people and your key man, your key founder, to obtain the optimal growth? Now, a lot of times you're going to hear the gurus who really are massively supportive of mitigating key man risk and focusing on that. They'll talk about private equity. And they'll talk about how private equity or even strategic buyers, other companies interested in buying your company, they'll talk about how if there is a key man that, or a key founder, for example, that's going to discount your value of your company. It's going to hurt the value of your company. And I'm not going to argue that they do discount that, right? But what I found is that they value growth and overall sales volume more than they value the key man risk. And I know for a fact that was for my company. My company was named after me, Fellers. I was the key man, but I was able to sell my company for over $100 million. And they were less concerned, private equity was less concerned about my key man risk than they were about the sales volume and growth of my company. And I sold my company to APG Private Equity, the exact same firm that Alex Hormozi sold his company to, which was APG. So I'm sure he has more experience with private equity than I do, but I've got some experience. And I know that if you pin down these private equity firms out there, people that are buying companies, you pin them down, ask them which is more important, key man risk or growth, overall sales volume, guarantee you they're going to pick growth and overall sales volume. So the reason why my particular company embraced key man risk instead of mitigating key man risk was primarily because of my mentor. My mentor, Al Reese, he's no longer alive. He's written several books back here that I'm constantly preaching to you all to read. He was a brilliant man. But he sat me down one day and he said, "Hey, Frank, you know, the name of your company needs to be changed because it was a generic name." He said, "You know, focus it on you. You're the key person. You're the most important person in this industry. And you built a brand name around Frank Fellers, so name the company out after yourself. And more importantly, focus on Frank Fellers and what Frank Fellers is trying to do." And I did that, and it resulted in my company, you know, growing to a massive size, over $100 million in net worth, over $200 million in annual sales. And I ended up selling that company, you know, well in advance of over $100 million. So what I proved was by changing the focus towards the key man and embracing the key man risk is that I outran the cost associated with key man risk. Now listen, the goal should be to embrace key man risk. Sure, you've got to do some work. You've got to have some focus on mitigation of key man risk. I'm not saying that you don't do some things to mitigate key man risk. I'm saying that the bulk of the focus should be on embracing the key founder, the key man. And especially if you look at, once again, the greatest companies in the world, most of them embraced key man risk instead of focusing too much on mitigating the key man risk. And, you know, getting back to Alex Hormozi has done a good job of mitigating key man risk. He's got a generic company name, acquisition.com. He's recruited other people, you know, to mitigate, you know, the risk of him personally. But I suggest that he should refocus the company on Alex Hormozi, rename that company from acquisition.com to Hormozi and focus on this great Alex Hormozi, the most important person in that company.